Today, we wanted to bring together two governors from particularly hard-hit states this year, Ohio Republican Mike Dewine and Michigan Democrat Gretchen Whitmer. Good morning to both of you, governors.
Good morning.
Good to be with you. Thank you very much, Margaret.
You know, the responsibility of dealing with this pandemic, including the decisions on health restrictions, on testing, how you're going to get this vaccine to your constituents, has really been placed on you as the executives in your state. Do you feel like the country learned this year the value of their local government? Governor Whitmer?
Well, I hope so. I know that this is not a moment that any one of us governors would have chosen to be in, and yet it was incumbent on us to rise to this challenge and to do what we needed to do to protect the people that we serve. In lieu of a broader national strategy, it really was on us to navigate. And I think we've done a lot of it together.
And Governor Dewine, do you think there is a new appreciation for the local officials versus the focus on the national?
No, I think people normally look to their governors in a crisis, a local crisis. You know, flooding along the Ohio River or tornadoes in western Ohio, that's normally what you think a governor will respond to. So I think in a sense, they're used to, a crisis. But of course, this is once in 100 years. We haven't seen anything like this at all. And I think one of the things that I have found good about it, frankly, is that I've gotten to know Gretchen, Governor Whitmer. I've got to know all our neighboring governors, and we talk quite a bit. And frankly, we have a common enemy. The common enemy is this virus, and we're battling back against it. There are certainly some people in my state who, disagree with some of the things that we have done.
Governor Whitmer, I mean, viruses don't know borders. Do you feel like, as two Midwesterners here, that there is more of a call now to work together regionally to deal with crises like this pandemic? I mean, are you looking at that when it comes, for instance, on how to vaccinate your populations?
This virus does not stop at state line. It doesn't stop at party line. This is a common enemy, and that's always been how we've looked at it, trying to learn from the best science. This being a novel virus, we've learned an incredible amount. But when I share information with Governor Dewine and vice versa, I get the benefit of the Cleveland Clinic and all the experts he's talking to, and he gets the benefit of the University of Michigan and all the experts we're talking to.
Will you coordinate those strategies on who goes first and who goes last?
Well, we share a lot of information, and we were on the phone with all the Midwestern governors just a few days ago. And one of the issues, of course, is, what's the priority? I think there's been a real consensus among what we call A1 group, which is the first responders, our medical people, our EMS, people who are risking their lives every single day, as well as where we've taken the most losses, and that is in our nursing homes. I think there's probably going to be more lack of consensus among people in general when you get beyond that first group.
Governor Whitmer, I wonder how you're thinking of it, because like we're talking about, essential worker is, kind of subjective here. In the state of Colorado, I read they're going to begin prioritizing employees at ski resorts, for example, because it's so key to their economy. I mean, how much is this going to vary state by state? Who's essential in Michigan?
I think it could vary a great deal. And the thing is, vaccines are coming online, and they're going to come at a faster pace. And so doing the hard work of acknowledging who has the most exposures, who is out there in jobs that are, come into contact with the public at greater numbers. These vaccines, what we have to do right now is really to ensure that the public understands these are safe. These are effective. As they become more available, we want people to make their plan to get vaccinated.
Governor Whitmer and Governor Dewine, both of you have been, criticized for taking extraordinary measures to protect your constituents, but been accused of, overstepping authority, for example. Governor Whitmer, I know you had that extraordinary kidnapping threat. There were threats against you, Governor Dewine as well. I wonder how the both of you make sense of that experience. Governor Whitmer?
Well, Margaret, I would say this. Every governor in the country is getting some sort of, backlash. The backlash that we're getting is because we've gone to take sure that every measure is about saving people's lives. And we have largely had a lot of success. Studies have shown we have saved thousands of lives. And yet, we know COVID-19 is still a very real threat. We're posting the highest numbers that we have in 10 months. Other governors are getting a backlash because they haven't done enough and people have been dying on their watch. There are no easy solutions here, no clearly obvious solutions here, yet I believe that the right thing to do is to follow the science and to put people's lives first, because we can and we will recover from the economic blowback from COVID-19 that has run amok in our country. What we can't do is, bring someone back to life.
Governor DeWine?
Well, I think it's understandable that people are upset. It's 9 months into this. People are tired of it. So I get it. And, we've asked people to make sacrifices. But my message to the people of Ohio continues to be, we should do everything we can to save lives. And hope is there. The vaccine is here. Now, it's going to take a few months, for everybody to get it. But this is not the time to pull back. This is not the time to give up. We know business, particularly small business, continuing to go is very, very important. We know they've been hit very, very hard. But you got to balance that with saving the lives.
Here's to a healthier and happier 2021. Thanks to you both, governors. We'll be right back. We like to honor tradition on Face the Nation, and each year we talk to authors whose new books have all been named some of the year's best. 4 of them join us now. John Meacham's new book is His Truth is Marching On, John Lewis and the Power of Hope. Peter Baker and Susan Glasser are the co-authors of The Man Who Ran Washington, The Life and Times of James A. Baker III. And Isabel Wilkerson is with us to discuss her latest, Cast, The Origins of Our Discontents. Good to see all of you. Isabel, I want to start with you. You tackle the very difficult subject of race in your book, in which you describe a caste system in our country, where you say skin color is really kind of the metric for where you fall in the hierarchy. Does the awakening within our country this year to the issue of systemic racism begin breaking that apart?
Despite the record turnout for this election, we have seen the ruptures that are as deep as they've ever been. We still face disturbing levels of division in our country. This idea of racialized polarization still continues. But I do hope that some of the things that have happened over the last year, this past summer, particularly involving the sense of awakening and outrage over what happened to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many people who have become part of our conversation. I hope that this has been leading us to some type of awakening to get past these divisions.
John, you profiled one of the giants of our civil rights struggle in this country, John Lewis, who we lost this year. And you wrote about his famous march to Selma, where he was severely beaten by law enforcement, even though this started out as a peaceful protest. You said when that footage was shown to the country, there was revulsion all over America. Revulsion, then redemption. Is there anything more American? Right now in America, we have revulsion that Isabel just described again at what happened. Are we at the point of redemption yet?
Well, redemption's a complicated thing, and that's something that we have to work on every day. John Lewis represents, I think, faith in 2 fundamental forces in life. He was on that bridge because of a faith in God, and he was on that bridge because ultimately of a faith in America. Frederick Douglass once said, there is no soil so conducive to the growth of reform as American soil. And so there is progress is possible. And John used to say, when people would say, well, nothing's ever changed, he would say, when he was a senior member of Congress, come walk in my shoes. Now, that's easy for me to say. I'm a white Southern male Episcopalian. Things tend to work out for me in this country. I wrote this book, and I wanted to profile John Lewis because he represents the embodiment of the best that the religious impulse can play in our public life. And more than any other person I've ever known, he closed the gap between a profession of allegiance to the lessons of the Sermon on the Mount with the practice of those virtues. And I think if we look at stories of people who walk among us and who just walked among us, and we see what they did, and they did something so remarkable, that should give us some faith, some inspiration that we can do the same.
Mm-hmm. And part of that process, Peter and Susan, is figuring out how to turn what the country is experiencing into action that falls upon our political leaders. I mean, you cover Washington, the both of you. We're seeing a lot of pressure on the president-elect to do something about race and division in this country. A lot of that early on is focused on representation. Does it end there? How does the president-elect begin dealing with this problem? Peter?
Well, look, you know, it's not just a question of who you put in your cabinet. That's only a start. There's obviously great wounds out there in this country to heal. And this is a president who has talked about doing that. He's talked about being a bridge builder and talked about being a healer and a person who wants to bring America together. You know, we talk about, in our book, we talk about James Baker not so much as a race healer, but as a bridge builder. We talk about how he tried to work with the other party to make things happen. He tried to work with people from other countries and across the Cold War divide with the Soviets to bring the world together. And I think that what Joe Biden is talking about doing is the same kind of thing, where we can cross these lines and cross these divides and begin to reimagine America in a better way.
Susan, it just feels so different. The divides feel more bitter and deep. How do you do that? And is there something unique to the challenge ahead?
You know, Margaret, I think the thing that was so striking is just how profoundly the political incentives in the country have changed. It's not just that we've had a uniquely divisive president. You know, we're often used to presidents more like Joe Biden, who at least talk and pay lip service to wanting to be a uniter, not a divider. So we certainly had a divisive president. But it's also that we've had a country and a political system that's just lost the ability, it seems, for politicians to work together across the aisle. You know, the question is, has that incentive structure changed so fundamentally that it's actually going to be impossible for even a Joe Biden to come in and sit down and work when the incentives and the reward system has gone in the other direction to be ever more extreme?
And Isabel, you in your book start off with a pretty stark image of choice and the moment in time. You describe a photo from 1936 in Germany in which a lone man stands in a crowd full of other men. They're all giving Nazi salutes and his hands are folded. It appears defiant almost. Why did you start on this? What does that signify to you?
Well, I started with that. It's the photo of August Landmesser. He was surrounded by people who were caught under the spell of the Nazis, and yet he alone was the one who was on the right side of history. And we all would like to believe that we would be on the right side of history in a situation such as that we'd somehow find a way to stand up in favor of justice while we're surrounded by injustice and people who are falling under the spell of that. And so it calls upon all of us to recognize, you know, where we happen to be, what each of us can do, the responsibilities that each of us has. And the reason why I speak about hierarchy and caste is because this is part of our inheritance, of this hierarchy that dates back to the time of enslavement. That essentially was in place for far longer than it was not in place in our country, from Jim Crow, which only ended in the 1960s, and how we live with the after effects of that. And it falls upon each of us to learn the history and to be able to reckon with it.
I'm interested in this idea, though, of what you were describing as a caste system, because in at least political narrative, the past 4 years have been about disruption. They've been about breaking apart systems. They've been about, trying to break apart the establishment in particular. But you have a very different view, right? You think and have pointed to the 2016 election in particular as about reinforcing those caste systems.
Well, a caste system essentially is an artificial, arbitrary graded ranking of human value, and it dates back to the time of enslavement. And so we've inherited the assumptions, the stereotypes, the rankings that have essentially been assigned to people based upon what they look like, which goes back to the time of enslavement. And I want to take a moment to remind ourselves of how long this has been a part of our country, that it's a foundation of the power structure that we have inherited.
John, you have used the phrase "the soul of America." One, we hear that phrase from the president-elect quite often. We've had the election that was supposed to be the fight for the soul of America. Where are we now? Where does that fight go? Are we at absolution? Where are we?
No, we're a long way from absolution, and will be until what Faulkner called the last red and dying evening. My sense of the soul of the country is that the soul is not wholly good or wholly bad, but is an arena of contention in which our better angels, to use Lincoln's phrase, do battle against our worst instincts, many of the worst instincts that Isabel's remarkable work has cast light on. And every day is part of that struggle. To go to what Peter and Susan were saying, division in American life is not the exception, it's the rule. And disagreement and the impulses of appetite and ambition and the clash of interest, all of these things are perennial and universal human forces. What we have to do, what we're called to do by history and by reason and to some extent by faith, is to devote ourselves to the idea and the reality of making real for everybody the promise of the country, which is that we were all created equal and were endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights. And at every point, Isabel mentioned the right side of history, at every point, from Seneca Falls to Selma to Stonewall, the right side of history has been those who stand on the side of individual rights, of the sanctity of the individual, of liberty under law, and of openness. Not of, we build bridges in this country when we're at our best, not walls. And that may sound like a homily, but it has the virtue of being rooted in history. Well, go around Washington. What are the monuments to? The monuments are to imperfect people and imperfect events, but they are ultimately about liberation and not captivity. And that's what the work of politics should be.
President Trump, as I referenced, was elected on this agenda of disrupting the status quo. Kamala Harris is a symbol of change. Joe Biden, though, is seen as a return of the establishment. What is the choice we are making here as a country? I mean, in some ways, the Biden platform was about restoring where we were.
Well, look, Margaret, it's very hard to imagine a world where we're just going to pretend that the last 4 years didn't happen, right? I think there was a palpable sense of returning to normalcy that powered and animated Joe Biden's campaign. But I think, the question is really whether identity politics is the choice that people on both sides of the aisle are making right now. Was it really about a policy platform for Biden or even for Donald Trump? To me, the lesson of the last few years is that people are much more likely to embrace identities and tribalism that they find to be comfortable in our politics right now at the expense even of a program.
Does the disruption become the new foundation here, or is it about restoration?
Margaret, to me, that's the thing that's so notable. You might want a more normal world, right? That word normalcy, has never had such political resonance. But the truth is that, the world has moved on, and there are a number of areas, the Middle East and the recognition of Israel, sort of midwife by the Trump administration, by several Arab countries, obviously is a different fact set and a different reality than the one that was there 4 years ago. Biden so far has assembled a government that suggests that a sort of certainly a return to competence and expertise, bringing people who served already in senior positions in the Obama administration. So there's a continuity, and then I think that the message to people is that Trump represents a discontinuity in American politics and policy. But it's unclear that that's really the case. And I think, to John's point, we're not just going to wash away the last few years. That's not how this is going to work. It's not over. It's not even the beginning of over. We're not just going to wake up one day and it's all going to be some crazy dream and, tweet storms.
But Peter, as Americans, we always think it's about us. And we're talking here about us as a country. But for the rest of the world, when they hear the president-elect say, America is back and we're ready to lead, hasn't the world moved on? Hasn't the world changed? Does the world really want America to organize it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think President-elect Biden probably recognizes that it's not simply a matter of returning to where things were 4 years ago. And if he doesn't, that's going to be a challenge for him because, in fact, you're right. The world has moved on to some extent. They've seen in the last 4 years what it's like when America goes in a different direction. I think there's a lot of burned feelings out there about international agreements. Who's going to want to enter a new international agreement with the United States if they feel like 4 years from now it might just be reversed by the next administration? And that's why I think President-elect Biden does have a challenge in terms of deciding what to keep and what not to keep of what his predecessor has done, partly because of the idea of not seeming like we just swing back and forth radically every term. He probably will adopt more of Trump's positions on China, for instance, maybe not the specific tactics on tariffs, but a stronger position against China than the Obama administration had. You can't just simply rerun the past. You're going to have to adapt the future, and that will include at least some of what the last 4 years has brought to us.
Thanks to all of you for the conversation and for joining us today. And Happy New Year. Stay healthy. We'll be right back. And that's it for us for 2020. We hope you have a happy and healthy and safe new year. And we'll see you next Sunday in 2021. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.